The white silk of my wedding gown swirled around my boots as I shoved open the tavern door and met the hard, unblinking stare of the Alpha King. I ran through muddy streets with my veil torn and hanging from tangled hair, lungs burning under the corset they laced too tight this morning. Behind me, chapel bells still clanged like warnings, while Cole shouted my name with more fury than heartbreak. He never loved me. He loved what marrying me would buy him. Land, a council seat. My father's influence stretched across 3 territories like currency. The tavern was my sanctuary, the one place his polished guards would never think to search. Rough timber walls, smoke thick enough to choke on, the smell of ale and unwashed wolf mixing with tallow candles dripping wax onto scarred tables. Men in leather and furs turned as one to stare at the spectacle I made. I was ready for laughter, for crude jokes and grabbing hands. Instead, the room went silent. At the far end, framed by the great stone hearth with flames licking at his back, stood a man in black leather armor, arms crossed over a chest broad enough to crack ribs, dark hair braided down his spine, eyes like molten amber that pinned me where I stood and saw straight through to the secret I buried 16 years ago. Someone whispered his name, Collins, the Alpha King. My omega scent, caged and hidden my entire life, snapped free like a bone breaking. His nostrils flared. Mine, he said, voice low and absolute. And I realized I hadn't run toward freedom at all. I ran straight into a claiming. The tavern didn't breathe again until he moved. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, me in torn silk and mud, him in black armor and quiet violence. The whole room held between us like a lung too scared to exhale. Then Collins turned his head slightly, just enough that the candlelight slid over the sharp line of his jaw, and looked past me. On your knees, he said. The command wasn't meant for me. Boots pounded outside. The door I'd crashed through moments ago slammed open behind me, and cold air knifed across my back. I didn't have to look to know whose scent hit first: polished steel and expensive soap, the sour tang of frustration under it. Mirabelle, Cole snapped. Step away from him. Now. Every instinct I owned told me to obey. Years of training in pretty manners and polite smiles yanked at my spine. Instead, I stayed frozen where I was, halfway between the Alpha King and the beta I was supposed to marry. No one in the tavern knelt. They just watched. Collins didn't raise his voice. I said, "On your knees." The air thickened. I felt it like pressure on my skin, power rolling off him in slow, heavy waves. A mercenary at the nearest table swallowed hard and dropped, one knee to the sticky floorboards. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, the only ones still standing were me, Collins, Cole, and the 3 guards at his back. "By order of Lord Halden," Cole said, loud enough for the gathered wolves to hear. "I am here to retrieve my betrothed. She has suffered a moment of hysteria. The wedding will proceed." His gaze sliced over me, hot and furious. "Come, Mirabelle." My heart slammed against my ribs. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Collins's eyes flicked to me, then returned to Cole like I was a piece on a board he'd already claimed. "She's not going anywhere with you," Collins said. Cole laughed, too sharp. "You have no say in this, Your Majesty. With respect. She is pledged by contract to my house." He really thought a piece of parchment outweighed the way the room smelled, now heavy with my unmasked omega scent and Collins's answering heat wrapping around it like a fist. Collins finally uncrossed his arms. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a predator stretching before it pounced. "You're mistaken," he said. "She ran into my territory, into my tavern, and released her scent under my protection." His hand lifted, just enough that his fingers brushed my bare wrist. It was barely a touch, but the bond snapped tight, a hot line between us that made my knees want to give out. "She is claimed," he finished. A ripple went through the watching wolves, a low murmur of shock and dark excitement. Cole went pale, then red. "You can't just claim another man's fiancé like some—" "I can," Collins cut in. "And I have." He stepped closer to me, a wall of heat at my side. I felt caged and shielded at once. "Ancient law is clear," he continued, speaking now to the room as much as to Cole. "A revealed omega under royal claim cannot be seized, traded, or coerced without the Alpha King's consent." His thumb stroked once over the inside of my wrist, a small grounding circle that made my breath catch. "You do not have my consent." Cole's jaw clenched. Her father will contest this. Then he can ride to my fortress and present his complaint, Collins said. Until then, she is under protective custody for her own safety. His gaze sharpened. Given that she was running from you, I'd say she needs it. All eyes swung to me, waiting to see if I would deny it, if I'd flutter and apologize and scurry back to the man I'd left at the altar. I thought of the contract my father signed without asking me, of the way Cole's hand had tightened on my arm whenever I hesitated, of the moment on the chapel steps when I smelled something floral and sweet on his collar that wasn't mine. Yes, I heard myself say, voice raw. I was running. The words hung there, a confession and a challenge. Cole took a step forward. Collins's arm came up instantly, a solid bar in front of me, pushing me back a fraction. The tavern's wolves bristled. Some shifted their weight like they were ready to leap if the beta so much as twitched wrong. Stand down, Collins said softly. For a terrifying moment, I thought he meant me. Then I realized he was talking to the whole room, containing them with nothing but tone. The power of it raised goosebumps along my arms. To avoid unnecessary bloodshed, he went on, you and your men will leave. Now. You can't keep her, Cole snarled. Collins tilted his head, studying him like an annoyance. Watch me. The silence that followed was thick as smoke. I could feel the bond humming, a wild, new thing between my ribs. Part of me wanted to scream that none of this was fair, that I hadn't asked to be claimed by anyone. Another part wanted to lean into the heat at my back and see if his scent felt as steady up close as it did from across the room. Cole's guards shifted uneasily. Even they could sense they were one wrong move away from dying on a tavern floor. This isn't over, Cole spat. His eyes locked on mine, promising things he didn't have the teeth to enforce with the Alpha King watching. Your father will hear about this, Mirabelle. So will the council. Fear speared through me. My father's disappointment. The council's anger. The way they'd spin this as betrayal instead of survival. Collins must have felt the spike in my scent, because his shoulders tightened. My riders will escort you back to the city limits, he said to Cole. If you cross into my forests again without invitation, we will consider it an act of aggression. I trust you understand the consequences. Cole hesitated, then jerked a stiff bow that was more insult than respect. He backed out of the tavern, eyes never leaving mine until the door slammed shut behind him. Only then did the room exhale. Chairs scraped. Someone muttered, "Moon save us," under his breath. Another said, louder, "Did you see the way she scented? That's a royal omega if I ever—" "Out," Collins said. No anger, just command. The tavern emptied fast. In less than a minute, we were alone except for the barkeep, who wiped his hands on his apron and wisely ducked behind the counter, pretending to be invisible. I realized my whole body was shaking. "You had no right," I whispered, the words torn between my teeth. "You don't even know me." Collins studied me in the flicker of the hearth, eyes assessing, unreadable. "I know enough. You know I ran from one man," I said. "That doesn't mean I wanted another." A corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "This isn't about what I want," he said quietly. "It's about keeping you alive." He stepped closer, slow enough that I could have stepped back. I didn't. He lifted his hand, fingers hovering near my throat without touching. "They would have dragged you out of here," he said. "Put you in a carriage with barred windows, locked you in a house where your scent would be used as a leash. Do you really think your beta would have let an omega this strong go once he understood what he had?" The word strong startled me more than omega. "I don't know you," I said again, softer. "No," he agreed. "You don't?" He dropped his hand. "My men are waiting," he added. "You'll ride with me to the fortress. There you'll have a room, food, guards who answer to me alone. We will sort out what happens next when you're not shaking hard enough to rattle your bones. I'm not going with you." "You are," he said, almost gently. "Because every wolf in this town just scented what you are. Without my protection, you won't make it to dawn." The terrifying part was that I believed him. The bond tugged, a low, insistent pull inside my chest, like some invisible thread had looped itself around my heart and tied me to the man in front of me. Terror and something darkly curious tangled together until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. "Is this what you call protective custody?" I asked, trying for sharp, landing closer to breathless. This is me giving you a choice you didn't have 10 minutes ago, Collins said. His gaze held mine steadily. You can walk out that door with me now and deal with the fallout under my shield. Or you can stay and see how long it takes before someone decides the Alpha King's claim doesn't matter. The tavern suddenly felt small. The world outside it felt worse. My fingers curled in the ruined silk of my skirt. And if I come with you? I asked. What am I to you? For the first time, something like heat flickered in his eyes that wasn't just power or strategy. For now, he said, a problem I intend to solve. He paused, then added more quietly, and an Omega whose life I don't plan on seeing wasted. It wasn't a promise. Not exactly. But it was more than anyone else had offered me. My legs finally remembered how to move. I stepped toward him, each stride feeling like a choice I couldn't take back. When I reached his side, he turned, positioning his body just slightly between me and the door, as if he couldn't help it. As we stepped out into the cold night, the bond hummed, bright and frightening and impossibly alive. I had fled my wedding to escape a cage. Now I was walking into the jaws of a king. And the scariest part wasn't that he might own me. It was that some buried, hungry part of me wanted to see what it felt like to be his. The fortress rose from the mountain like something carved by gods who hated beauty. All sharp edges and cold stone, towers clawing at gray sky, walls thick enough to swallow sound. I rode behind Collins on a warhorse that could have trampled me without breaking stride, my ruined gown bunched awkwardly around my legs, the scent of leather and wolf so thick I could barely breathe around it. No one spoke during the climb. His warriors flanked us in silence, eyes scanning the dark forests like they expected ambush at any moment. Maybe they did. I was learning fast that nothing in Collins's world came without teeth attached. The gates opened without a word, massive iron and oak groaning inward. Torches burned along the walls, casting orange light over everything. Training yards stretched to our left, scarred earth and weapon racks glinting in the firelight. To the right, barracks built into the mountainside itself, wolves in leather armor pausing mid-conversation to stare as we passed. At me. They were staring at me. The runaway bride. The hidden Omega. The fool who fled one cage and landed in the jaws of a king. Collins dismounted in one smooth motion, then reached up. His hands closed around my waist and lifted me down like I weighed nothing. For a breath we stood too close, his heat wrapping around me, the bond humming low in my chest. This way, he said, releasing me. I followed because I had no other choice. Inside, the fortress was colder. Stone walls climbed toward vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Tapestries hung between iron sconces, battle scenes and wolves mid-hunt stitched in faded thread. Our footsteps echoed, mine uneven in torn slippers, his steady as a heartbeat. Warriors watched from doorways. Servants pressed themselves against walls as we passed. Everyone moved like they were afraid to breathe wrong in his presence. He led me up a winding stair, through corridors that twisted and branched until I'd lost all sense of direction. Finally, he stopped at a heavy wooden door, pushed it open, and stepped aside. Your chamber, he said. I hesitated, then walked past him into warmth. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. Furs covered a bed large enough for 3 people. Candles burned on a table near the window, casting soft light over tapestries that were newer here, less brutal. A door in the far wall stood ajar, revealing a bathing room beyond. It was the most beautiful cage I'd ever seen. You'll be safe here, Collins said from the doorway. No one enters without my permission. I turned to face him. And you? I won't enter without yours. The promise should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like a countdown, like he knew eventually I'd open that door myself. We need to talk, he continued, about why you're here and what happens next. My hands curled into fists at my sides. You claimed me in front of a room full of witnesses. I'd say what happens next is fairly obvious. Is it? He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with those unreadable amber eyes. You think I dragged you here to lock you in a tower and force a bond? Didn't you? No. He said it simply, like the truth was that easy. I brought you here because Cole would have hurt you. Because your father sold your secret to secure an alliance. Because an unmated Omega with your bloodline wouldn't survive a week outside these walls once word spread. Bloodline. The word snagged. You don't know anything about my bloodline. I know enough. He pushed off the doorframe, stepping into the room. Not crowding, just closing the distance enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. I know your father hid what you were for 23 years. I know the council would go to war over an Omega with royal lineage if they thought they could control her. My breath caught. I'm not royal. Your mother was. The floor tilted. I reached for the bedpost, gripping carved wood to keep standing. That's a lie. It's not, his voice gentled, just slightly. And it's why I'm offering you a deal instead of a chain. I forced myself to breathe. What deal? Stay here as my intended queen for 6 months. Let the council and Cole see you're under my protection. Help me outmaneuver the nobles who'd use you as a weapon in their games. He paused. In exchange, I keep you alive and give you time to figure out what you actually want. And after 6 months, we reassess. He tilted his head. If you want to leave, I'll grant you land and protection far from here. Somewhere you can live without hiding. It sounded too reasonable, too generous. Why would you do that? Because I don't want a queen who's here because she has no other choice. Something flickered in his expression. I want one who chooses this. Chooses me. The honesty of it hit harder than any command. I have conditions, I said, hating how my voice shook. Name them. My own chamber. No forced marking. No bond consummated unless I agree. I lifted my chin. And the freedom to refuse you. Publicly if I have to. His mouth curved, almost a smile. Agreed. Just like that? Just like that. He stepped back toward the door. Though I should warn you, the bond won't make this easy. It's going to pull. Hard, especially when we're close. I felt it even now. That invisible thread tugging at my ribs. I can handle it, I said. Can you? He looked at me for a long moment, something heated and patient in his gaze. Then we'll find out together. He moved to leave, then paused at the threshold. Mirabelle? My name and his voice did things I didn't want to examine. What? You're not a prisoner here. His eyes held mine. You're a guest. And eventually, if you let yourself, you might be something more. The door closed softly behind him. I stood alone in my beautiful cage, the bond humming warm and insistent in my chest, and wondered if 6 months would be enough time to decide whether I was safer running from this king or running straight into his arms. The fortress settled around me like a second skin that didn't quite fit. Days blurred into a pattern I hadn't chosen. Wake to a knock at my chamber door, choke down breakfast while a stiff-backed tutor corrected the way I held my spoon. Walked, breathed. Queens do not slouch, Mirabelle. Queens do not stare at the floor. Queens do not flinch when men bow. I wanted to tell her I wasn't a queen. I was an Omega in a borrowed dress. But every time I opened my mouth, I heard my father's voice instead, reminding me how easily girls became problems to be solved. The servants whispered anyway. They thought I couldn't hear them in the corridors, voices slipping through stone the way smoke slipped under doors. The Omega the king dragged in from a tavern. She must have bewitched him. Did you smell her? That's not a house pet. That's a weapon. I pretended not to notice the way they watched me, the way warriors straightened when I passed, eyes flicking to the side of my throat where a mark could have been. They looked for chains that weren't there and didn't know what to do with the invisible ones humming under my skin. In the evenings, etiquette lessons shifted to strategy. An older advisor spread maps on the table and drilled me on borders, treaties, names of minor lords I was expected to recognize on sight. My head throbbed by dusk, but I forced every detail into place. If I was going to be used as a piece on this board, I was damn well going to learn how the game worked. On the third night, I found the training yard. I should have gone back to my rooms. Instead, I stood in the shadows near the archway, arms wrapped around myself for warmth, and watched the king. Collins moved like the blade in his hand was an extension of his body. No wasted effort, no showy flourishes, just clean, brutal efficiency. He faced one warrior, then 2, then 3, trading steel for claws, shifting mid-strike in a blur of black fur and muscle that made the watching men suck in sharp breaths. He was beautiful in the way storms were beautiful, something you admired from a distance while praying it never chose you as its target. When he finally called an end to the session, sweat slicked his hair to his neck and darkened the leather across his chest. His wolf still rode just beneath his skin. I could feel it in the air, in the way the other males kept their eyes down, throats bared without thinking. His gaze found me in the archway like he'd known I was there the whole time. You should be sleeping, he said later, after the others had left, and we were alone in the great hall. Only a few candles guttered along the walls, throwing more shadow than light. Hard to sleep when the fortress is buzzing with rumors about the king's new Omega, I said. Apparently I'm either a witch, a mistake, or a temporary amusement. He poured himself water from a jug, the casual domesticity at odds with the memory of him breaking a man's stance with a flick of his wrist. You care what they say? No, I lied. I care what you think. His hand stilled on the pitcher. Do you? He asked quietly. Heat pricked along my cheeks. You claim you brought me here for my safety, that this is a strategic arrangement, but you haven't said what I am to you, beyond useful. His eyes lifted to mine, steady and unworried. Would you rather I lied and called it love? Yes, I snapped, surprising us both. Or at least something less, calculated. I left one contract marriage. I didn't run straight into another just to trade my father's politics for yours. Silence fell like a dropped stone. You think that's all this is? He said. Not a question. What else could it be? My voice cracked on the edges. You needed a way to outmaneuver Cole in the council. An Omega with royal blood appears at your feet. Convenient. Powerful. Mark-shaped. I tapped my throat. His jaw flexed. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost unsettled. You're not wrong, he admitted. When you ran into that tavern, I saw exactly what you were and what it would mean if I let anyone else get their hands on you. Claiming you was a strategic move. The words hit like ice. I turned away so he wouldn't see my face. But, he added, voice roughening, that was before the bond started clawing at my ribs every time you walked into a room. I went still. Before my wolf started pacing every time you left my sight, he continued. Before I could pick your scent out of 100 on the wind and feel calmer for it. My chest tightened around something fragile and stupid. Don't, I said. Don't say things like that just because you're good at using words as weapons. I don't use words as weapons, he said. I use armies. Words are more dangerous. They make people hope. He moved closer, slow enough that I could retreat if I wanted to. I didn't. The fire in the hearth had burned low, but his heat made up the difference, seeping into the space between us. You are political advantage, he said simply. You are also a woman who ran from a life that would have killed her in slow inches. A woman whose first instinct, when faced with a king, was not to bow, but to argue. He stopped less than a breath away. I had to tilt my head back to keep his eyes. And the bond, he murmured, is affecting me more than I planned for. My pulse thundered in my ears. Good, I whispered, before I could stop myself. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to be dragged around by something you didn't choose. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. Careful, Omega. You start talking to your king like that and he might forget he's supposed to be the dangerous one. Maybe I'm dangerous too, I said. His gaze dropped to my lips. I felt the moment it shifted when tension that had been hovering on the edge of awareness snapped taut. The hall, the rumors, the lessons, all of it fell away until there was only his hand lifting, thumb brushing a stray strand of hair from my cheek, knuckles grazing my jaw like he was memorizing the shape of it. Mirabelle, he said softly. The sound of my name in that voice hollowed me out. He leaned in, just enough that his breath warmed my mouth, his scent wrapping around me in sandalwood and storm. The bond howled, not cruel this time, just desperate, hungry. If I rose on my toes, I could close the distance. If he bent his head, he could end the question that had followed us through every corridor of this fortress. My fingers curled in his shirt, traitorously. We said no mark, I whispered. I remember. His forehead touched mine, gentle. We said nothing about a kiss. My heart tripped. Collins. The doors of the great hall slammed open. We jerked apart like guilty teenagers as a young warrior skidded to a stop on the stone, chest heaving, eyes wide when he realized exactly whose moment he'd barged into. Your Majesty, he gasped. The council they've convened early. They demand an audience. Tonight. Collins's expression shuddered so fast it almost hurt to watch. The king slid back into place where the man had been a heartbeat before. Of course they do, he muttered, then louder. Tell them I'm coming. The warrior fled as quickly as he'd arrived. I stared at the empty doorway, throat tight, the phantom heat of Collins's almost kiss still tingling on my lips. This is what I meant, he said quietly. A cage made of gold. Lessons, politics, Interruptions. And bonds, I added, hating how unsteady my voice sounded. And bonds, he agreed. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he straightened, shoulders rolling back under the weight of his crown, invisible though it was. Go back to your chamber, Mirabelle. Lock the door. Whatever the council says tonight, I don't want you near that room. You think they'll try to use me, I said. I know they will. His eyes softened, just a fraction. You are not their weapon. You're mine to protect. Yours, I repeated, the word a burn and a balm all at once. He hesitated, like there was more he wanted to say. Then he turned and strode toward the doors, cloak flaring behind him. Every inch the Alpha King. I watched him go, heart pounding, lips still tingling with a kiss that hadn't quite happened, and realized the worst part of this gilded cage wasn't the walls or the whispers. It was knowing that if he'd taken one more step toward me instead of the council, I wouldn't have stopped him. The council chamber smelled like smoke, ink, and too many wolves pretending to be civilized. I stood at Collins's right hand on the raised dais, palms damp against the silk of my gown, while nobles in embroidered coats filled the semicircle below us. Stone columns climbed toward a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of ancient battles, alphas locked in combat, omegas kneeling at their feet like prizes. My stomach churned every time I looked up. Let the record show, droned the steward, that the High Council of the Northern Territories convenes at the request of Lord Cole Halden concerning the status of Lady Mirabelle Halden and her recent relocation. Relocation. That was a pretty word for what had happened. Cole stood in the center of the chamber, immaculate as ever. New cloak, new boots, the same cold eyes. Beside him, my father. My heart stuttered. Father looked older than I, remembered more gray at his temples, more lines around his mouth. But his spine was as straight as ever, his jaw set in that familiar, disapproving line that had haunted my childhood. Your Majesty. Cole bowed to Collins, then inclined his head toward me with something that might have been a sneer. And Lady Mirabelle. He made the title sound like an accusation. Collins didn't move. He sat loose in his throne, one elbow resting on the armrest, fingers idly tapping the wood. Only the tightness at the corners of his eyes betrayed tension. You requested this hearing, Collins said. Speak. Cole lifted a folded document, the crackle of parchment loud in the hush. I stand before the council to contest the unlawful seizure of my betrothed. Lady Mirabelle is pledged to me by contract, and by the will of her father. She fled our wedding under a fit of female hysteria, and has since ensnared your Majesty under dubious circumstances. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ensnared. Like I'd thrown a net instead of my entire life away. Cole held up the parchment. This is the signed betrothal contract between House Halden and my own, witnessed by council members. Approved by Lord Mirren. He nodded toward my father and sealed 3 months past. Under pack law, Mirabelle is my intended, bound to return to my care. Every eye swung to me, then to Collins. Your Majesty, one gray-bearded lord said. Rumors suggest the girl revealed Omega scent in your tavern the night she arrived. Such a revelation, under such intimate proximity, could hardly be accidental. My cheeks burned. I fought the urge to wrap my arms around myself. Another noblewoman sniffed. An unmated Omega hiding in a beta household, conveniently revealing herself in front of the Alpha King? It smacks of manipulation, of ambition, of survival. I wanted to scream. Collins's fingers stopped tapping. Mirabelle? He said quietly, without looking at me. Speak. My throat closed. About what? About whether you tricked me, he said. Or if there's another reason your scent waited until that night. All those eyes. Cole's, cold and possessive. My father's, sharp and warning. The council's, greedy with curiosity. I drew a breath that scraped my lungs. I didn't choose when my scent broke, I said. I chose to run, that's all. Laughter, soft and ugly, from somewhere in the back. Cole's mouth tightened. With respect, Your Majesty, my betrothed has always been delicate. She has a tendency toward dramatics when she does not get her way. Delicate. Like the times he'd squeezed my arm hard enough to bruise because I'd asked to delay the wedding were just dramatics. Interesting, Collins murmured. Because the woman I met in that tavern didn't look delicate. She looked like someone willing to sprint barefoot through a city rather than be forced into your bed. The murmurs grew louder. My father stepped forward, face tight. Your Majesty, whatever my daughter's mistakes, the fact remains. She is bound by contract. Our house has invested heavily in this alliance. We hid. He cut himself off, too late. Collins's eyes sharpened. You hid what, Lord Mirren? Father's jaw clenched. His gaze flicked to me, furious, then back to the king. We hid her nature, for the good of the realm. The floor seemed to tilt. My nature? I repeated, voice thin. Cole looked annoyed more than surprised. Your father suspected years ago you might be more than beta. We agreed it was best not to encourage it. Omegas complicate things, Mirabelle. You know this. Heat roared in my ears. You knew, I whispered. Both of you. You scented me and said nothing. Your mother's bloodline was already suspect, Father snapped. Do you think the council would have left us our lands if they knew we harbored an Omega with royal traces? I did what I had to do to preserve our name. Royal traces. All the times I'd felt something restless under my skin and been told I was imagining it crashed over me like cold water. The herbal teas that dulled my senses. The locked windows during certain phases of the moon. The way Father had panicked when a visiting alpha stood too close. He hadn't been protecting me. He'd been protecting himself. You drugged me, I said, the realization slicing through numbness. You smothered my wolf for years so the council wouldn't take your seat. Watch your tone, he snapped. She'll use any story to steal deeper into your favor, Your Majesty. Cole cut in smoothly. Her nature is to manipulate. Omegas. Finish that sentence carefully, Colin said. The room hushed. Cole swallowed. I petition the council to uphold our contract. Order her return to my house so we can complete the bond properly and end this spectacle. Several lords nodded. One cleared his throat. By law, a signed betrothal. By law, Collins interrupted. A revealed Omega under the Alpha King's claim cannot be traded, bartered, or married without his explicit consent. Are you suggesting council statutes outweigh the old laws? His voice remained calm, but power threaded through each word. The Lord faltered. Of course not, Your Majesty. Still, the circumstances, Collins said, are that a hidden Omega ran from a contract she did not consent to, that her father suppressed her nature for political gain, that her fiancé chose to chase her with guards rather than ask why she ran. He finally stood. The chamber seemed to shrink around his height, his presence. He stepped down from the dais, stopping level with Cole, close enough that every wolf in the room bristled at the tension. You talk about rights, Collins said softly. Let's discuss hers. His hand lifted, not to touch me, but open, palm up, a question between us. Mirabelle, he said. Do you wish to return to Cole Halden's house? Every breath in the chamber held. I looked at Cole and saw a life of quiet suffocation, of pretty gowns and careful smiles, and a mate who'd never once asked what I wanted, only what I could provide. I looked at my father and saw bloodline and status, not a daughter. Then I looked at Collins, at the man who'd thrown his body between me and the world more than once now, who'd given me conditions and kept them, who'd almost kissed me in the dark and then walked away when duty called. No, I said, voice steady. I do not. Cole's face twisted. You are I am not yours, I cut in. My knees shook, but the words did not. I never was. You signed a paper with my father. You never once asked me. Gasps echoed off stone. Collins's mouth curved just a fraction. There, he said to the council. You have her answer. My answer is this. The contract is void. Any agreement made while her nature was illegally suppressed is invalid under royal law. Cole surged forward. You can't. Collins's power hit the room like a storm, pressing us all down. I can, he said. And I have. He turned, deliberately offering Cole his profile, and faced the council. To quell further gossip, he said, voice carrying to the rafters. I will make this plain. Lady Mirabelle is under my protection, not as a temporary guest, but as my chosen. He paused, letting the words sink in. From this day, she is my intended queen. We are in formal courtship. The chamber erupted outrage, shock, whispers sharp as thrown knives. My lungs forgot how to work. Intended Queen. I stared at him, pulse roaring. He hadn't asked me. He hadn't even warned me. And yet, as I watched the council's faces shift from greedy to wary, from dismissive to calculating, I understood exactly what he'd done. He hadn't just shielded me. He'd moved me from pawn to piece no one could touch without challenging his throne. Cole looked like he might choke. My father looked like someone had ripped the ground from under his feet. Any lord who wishes to contest this, Collins added, may do so in the ring outside at dawn, with steel. His smile turned feral. Bring your own healer. Silence dropped, heavy and complete. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. Finally, Collins turned back to me. For the briefest moment, his eyes softened, something almost apologetic in their depths. Mirabelle, he said quietly, for my ears alone, try to look less horrified. They'll think I forced you. I don't know what you did, I whispered back, or how I'm supposed to feel about it. His hand brushed mine, the faintest touch, the bond flaring warm. Feel however you need to, he said. Just stay. I looked at Cole, at my father, at the wolves who would happily devour me for their own gain. Then I looked at the Alpha King, who had just told the entire court I was his future queen. For the first time since I'd run from the chapel, I realized something terrifying. In a room full of wolves, the safest place might truly be at his side. The first time I felt someone lie, it tasted like ash on my tongue. A lord stood before Collins 3 days after the council session, claiming loyalty while his scent reeked of something sour and wrong. My wolf stirred, hackles rising without warning, and before I could stop myself, I'd whispered, "He's lying." Collins didn't flinch, just looked at the Lord with those cold amber eyes and said, "Try again, this time with truth." The man went pale, confessed he'd been feeding information to border rivals. By evening, he was stripped of his titles and escorted from the fortress under guard. "How did you know?" Collins asked me later, alone in his study while rain hammered the windows. I shook my head, still rattled. "I don't know, I just felt it." Like his words didn't match what was underneath. His gaze sharpened with something between curiosity and satisfaction. "Your Omega senses are waking. Royal bloodline Omegas can read intent, emotion, the truth people try to bury." He leaned back in his chair. "That makes you dangerous. Or useful," I said quietly. "Both." His mouth curved. "Which is why you're sitting beside me at the next dispute." And I did. It became our pattern. Nobles came with grievances, border issues, trade complaints. I sat in the smaller throne they dragged beside his, hands folded in silk skirts, and felt the room like currents in water. Anger here, fear there, ambition wrapped in false smiles. Sometimes I said nothing. Other times I'd lean close and murmur what I sensed, and Collins would adjust his rulings accordingly. The court started looking at me differently. Not just the Omega, the king claimed, but the one who saw through their masks. It should have felt like power. Instead, it felt like standing on a cliff edge, waiting to see if the wind would hold me or throw me off. One afternoon, a young warrior came to Collins, shaking so hard his armor rattled. Fresh from his first skirmish, blood still under his nails, eyes too wide. Collins tried reason, then command, but the boy just kept spiraling, wolf rising in panic. I moved without thinking, crossed the space between us, and placed my hand on his arm, letting my scent calm, grounding, safe wash over him. "Breathe," I murmured. "You're here. You survived. Breathe with me." His wolf settled. The shaking eased. Within minutes, he was standing straighter, nodding, embarrassed but functional. When he left, Collins stared at me like I'd just performed magic. "What?" I asked. "You soothed a wolf on the edge of feral in under 3 minutes." His voice held something close to awe. "Do you understand how rare that is?" I didn't. But I felt it humming under my skin now. This thing I'd spent years suppressing, finally stretching awake. The evenings changed too. Collins started asking me to dine with him. Not in the great hall where everyone watched, but in his private chambers. Smaller fires, fewer guards, just us and the flicker of candlelight painting shadows on stone walls. We talked about everything and nothing. His childhood under a father who'd ruled with fists, My mother's stories about wolves who could shift under moonlight and run faster than wind. The weight of crowns neither of us had wanted, but both of us wore anyway. One night, he gestured to the chair in front of him. Sit. I did, wary. He moved behind me, fingers gentle as they pulled pins from my hair. I went still, hardly breathing, as he worked through the tangles with surprising care. My sister used to make me do this, he said quietly, before she mated north and left. Said it was the only time I'd stay still long enough to listen. Where is she now? Safe, far from politics and blood. His hands moved in slow, steady strokes, sectioning my hair. I made sure of that. I closed my eyes, the intimacy of it stealing my breath. His armor pressed cold against my back, but his touch was warm, careful. The contrast warrior and tenderness made my chest ache. There, he murmured when he finished. I reached back, feeling the neat braid he'd woven. Thank you. Our eyes met in the window's reflection. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he stepped back, deliberately putting space between us. We should set a rule, I said, voice rough. What kind of rule? No mating, Mark. I turned to face him. Not until I choose. Not because the bond demands it or the council expects it. Only when I'm ready. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe. Or relief. Agreed. Just like that? Just like that. He moved to the window, silhouette dark against rain-streaked glass. I don't want you because you have no choice, Mirabelle. I want you to want this. The honesty cracked something open inside me. What if I never do? I whispered. He looked back, eyes catching firelight. Then I'll have had the honor of knowing you anyway. The bond flared, hot and insistent between my ribs. It had been growing stronger every day, every shared meal, every moment his hand brushed mine. Every night I fell asleep, smelling his scent on the wind from his chambers down the hall. I stood, closing the distance before I could think better of it. Collins. Mirabelle. My name was a warning. And a prayer. The bond. I started. I know. It's getting harder to ignore. I know, he repeated, rougher this time. I stopped close enough to feel his heat. What do we do about it? His hand lifted, hovering near my face, not quite touching. We stay smart. We keep the boundaries you set. His thumb grazed my cheekbone, the barest pressure. Even when every instinct I have is screaming to pull you close and never let go. My breath hitched. That's not staying smart. No, he agreed. It's not. We stood there, teetering on the edge of something we'd both agreed not to cross. The fire crackled. Rain drummed. The bond pulled taut as a bowstring. Go back to your chamber, he said finally, voice strained. Before I forget, I'm supposed to be the patient one. I should have listened. Should have walked away while I still could. Instead, I rose on my toes and pressed my lips to his cheek, just beside his mouth, close enough to feel him go rigid. Good night, Collins, I whispered against his skin. Then I left before he could respond, before I could see whether he looked as wrecked as I felt. Back in my chamber, I pressed my fingers to my mouth, feeling the ghost of almost the shape of what we kept denying. The bond hummed, patient and relentless. We'd set our boundary. No mark until I chose. But the way my heart raced when he braided my hair, the way his eyes tracked me across every room, the way we circled each other like wolves learning a new dance that wasn't something boundaries could contain. That was inevitability, dressed up as restraint. And we both knew it. The first sign of trouble was the meat. It arrived late to the kitchens, half frozen and slick, with a scent that didn't belong to any of Collins's usual suppliers. The cook grumbled about delays and bad routes, but my wolf prickled at the edges, uneasy without knowing why. 2 days later, one of the outer villages reported a raid on a supply wagon, no casualties, just barrels cracked open and left to spill grain into the mud like an insult. Rogues testing our borders, Collins said in the war room, fingers pressed to a map. Or someone wants us to think so. Inside help, I murmured, tracing the pattern of attacks. Always just enough damage to sting. Never enough to justify full retaliation. Whoever's doing this knows exactly how close they can cut without starting a war. His gaze slid to me, approving and grim. Exactly. The letters started the same week. They appeared on my bedside table, on my plate at breakfast, tucked beneath my cloak in the cloakroom, No scent but mine, no trace of the messenger. Always sealed with the Halden crest, always in Cole's careful, cruel hand. The first said he missed me. The second said he forgave me. The third listed names of nobles who'd supported Collins's rise to power, followed by thinly veiled hints about old scandals, buried debts, things that would look very bad if dragged into the light. At the bottom, in elegant script, he'd written, "You're not the only one with secrets, Mira. Does the king know what your father did to earn his seat?" I burned that one in my hearth and watched the ash curl. I didn't tell Collins. Maybe I should have. But every time I looked at him, at the weight he carried, the maps, the endless disputes, I couldn't bring myself to add one more worry. And a selfish, frightened part of me didn't want him to see how deeply Cole still knew where to stick the knife. The night of the feast, the fortress felt like it was holding its breath. Candles crowded the great hall, dripping wax onto long tables laden with roasted meat, fresh bread, and jugs of spiced wine. Banners hung from the rafters, gold and black, the Alpha King's sigil looming over us all. Warriors filled the benches, their laughter loud, their tension louder. I wore a dark green gown that hugged my waist and left my shoulders bare, my hair braided back from my face in the pattern Collins's hands had memorized. His gaze snagged on me the moment I entered, heat flashing in his eyes before he smoothed it away under the watching crowd. He sat at the head of the table, armor polished, cloak thrown back. I took my place at his right, the seat that had become mine by custom and rumor. The bond hummed between us, steady as a heartbeat. "Two answered threats," Collins said, lifting his cup. "And to the ones too cowardly to show their faces." The hall roared approval. I raised my own cup, the wine scent rich and spiced. My wolf shifted uneasily, then calmed as Collins's thigh brushed mine under the table, solid and warm. I took a sip, bitter. Something cold crawled up the back of my throat, slow and greasy. My fingers tightened around the cup. Sound blurred, the hall narrowing to a tunnel of flickering light. Collins's head snapped toward me. "Mirabelle?" I tried to answer. My tongue felt thick, my limbs suddenly heavy, as if my bones were turning to sand inside my skin. The cup slid from my hand, clattering against the table. His chair scraped back hard enough to jolt the nearest lords. The next second he was in front of me, one hand on my shoulder, the other tipping my chin up so he could see my eyes. "Who poured for her?" His voice dropped into something low and lethal that silenced the room. All at once, nausea and panic surged, my wolf thrashing against whatever was trying to smother her. I grabbed his forearm, nails digging into leather. "Something's wrong," I managed. He swore, a vicious sound I'd never heard from him before. The cup still lay on its side, a dark stain spreading across the table. Collins snatched it up and pressed it into the hand of the nearest warrior. "To the healer, now, and find the servant who brought it." The warrior bolted. The hall erupted voices, scraping benches, the sharp tang of fear spiking in the air. I swayed, vision dimming at the edges. "Look at me," Collins ordered. I forced my focus back to his face. The usual cool control was gone. His eyes had gone darker, wolf close to the surface, jaw clenched so hard a muscle ticked. "Stay with me, Omega." "Don't. Call me that in front of them," I whispered, irrational and sinking. "In front of them? You're the queen they just watched someone try to kill." He scooped me up as if I weighed nothing, one arm under my knees, the other braced around my back and turned toward the doors. "No one leaves," he snarled over his shoulder. "Check every cup, every barrel. Any servant who can't account for where they were tonight answers to me." The tone in his voice promised pain. Back in my chamber, the healer's draft burned down my throat, chasing the poison with bitter heat. "It wasn't enough to kill," she said. "Just enough to fog my senses, make me pliant, suggestible." "Sleeping draft," she murmured, sniffing the residue in the cup, mixed with something to dull resistance. "Whoever did this wanted you unaware, not dead." "That's worse," Collins said flatly. When she left us alone, the chamber felt too small for how furious he was. He paced in front of the hearth, armor catching firelight, hands flexing like he needed something to break. "You could have collapsed in front of the entire court. You could have been dragged out of that hall while I was looking the other way. But I wasn't," I said, voice still thick but clearing. "You caught it in time." His head snapped toward me. "That's not the point, Mirabelle." "Then what is?" He stalked closer, eyes burning. The point is that Cole just declared war in my own hall, that someone inside these walls helped him do it. And that he broke off, jaw working. Me what? I pushed. You've been hiding things from me. The rebuke landed sharper than any poison. I'm hiding? I let out a humorless laugh. You think I don't see the maps you don't let me look at? The meetings you send me out of when certain names come up? You keep me surrounded by danger and then act surprised when danger arrives. You are here because without me, you'd already be back in Cole's house with a bond you didn't choose, he snapped. Or dead in a ditch. Don't confuse protection with imprisonment. Protection? I shoved off the bed, anger burning through the lingering haze. An attack in your great hall, with your warriors watching, is protection? That attack wouldn't have happened if I'd known the letters were still coming, he shot back. Silence slammed between us. He'd said letters. My stomach dropped. You know about those? He stared at me. I know you burned at least 3 in your hearth. I know the last one was slipped under your door this morning. I know Cole's handwriting better than I like to admit. Heat flared in my cheeks, shame and fury tangled. So you were spying on me. I was trying to keep you alive, he bit out. You don't get to keep secrets from me when those secrets have my enemy's crest stamped on them. They were my secrets, I said, bitter. My past, my father, my mistake. Forgive me for wanting one thing in this fortress that wasn't shared property. He made a sound like a growl, low and frustrated. You are not property. Then stop treating me like a weakness you have to manage, I snapped. Stop making decisions about my life and my bond and my future without asking what I want. We were close now, too close, anger pulling us forward until we were practically chest to chest. My heart hammered. His scent, storm and leather and something darker wrapped around me, stronger with his temper up. The bond vibrated under my skin, caught between fear and a fierce, unwanted thrill. What you want, he said slowly, is to pretend you can stand in the middle of a war and not be part of it. What you want, I flung back, is a convenient queen who can sense lies and soothe your soldiers without ever asking why she has to. His hands closed around my upper arms, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to anchor. What I want, he said, voice low and ragged, is for you to be alive when this is over. I will not bury another person. He cut himself off, breath rough. You what? I whispered. The air between us crackled. His gaze dropped to my mouth. My fingers curled in the front of his armor, traitorously, pulling him closer instead of shoving him away. This is exactly what Cole is playing for, he said, even as he leaned in, forehead almost touching mine. He wants you doubting me. He wants me off balance. I don't care what Cole wants, I said. I care that you don't trust me enough to tell me the whole truth. About him. About my father. About the things he thinks he can expose. I trust you more than is good for either of us, Collins murmured. His nose brushed mine. My breath stuttered. Then prove it, I whispered. For a moment, time stopped. Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was all the things we'd been swallowing for weeks. Fear, fury, the relentless pull of the bond breaking loose in one scorching, devastating rush. His mouth claimed mine, hot and demanding, and I answered with everything I'd tried to deny, fingers fisting in his cloak as if I could drag him inside my skin. The bond roared, golden and blinding. My wolf surged up, not in panic but in fierce, hungry relief. He pressed me back against the nearest wall, one hand braced beside my head, the other at my waist, holding me up when my knees threatened to give. I tasted wine and storm, and the edge of something that felt dangerously like home. Mirabelle. He broke away just enough to breathe, voice ragged against my lips. If we don't stop. I didn't want to stop. For the first time in forever, I felt like I wasn't running from something but toward it. A knock crashed into the moment, hard and urgent. Your Majesty. A voice, muffled through the door. Forgive me, but we've found the servant who handled the Queen's cup. He's gone. And there's more. You need to see this. Collins went still, muscles locked. Of course. He stepped back slowly, like it physically hurt to put space between us, hands falling away from my skin. Later, he said hoarsely. We will finish this later. My lips were swollen. My heart felt like it was trying to punch through my ribs. You promise? His eyes met mine, wolf dark and burning. On my crown. Then he turned and strode to the door, leaving me pressed against the wall, breathless and shaking, with the taste of him still on my tongue, and the knowledge that while Cole was busy trying to tear us apart, we'd just done the most dangerous thing of all. We'd stopped pretending the bond was only a burden. Now it was a weapon. And we had no idea yet whether it would save us or destroy everything we were trying to protect. The tavern looked smaller when I came back with a king at my side. We arrived at dusk, the sky bruised purple over the tree line, our horses blowing white breath into the cold air. Collins had insisted on a small entourage, 2 scouts, 1 diplomat, 1 guard, because neutral rogues spooked easily when faced with armies. The tavern owner had requested this meeting himself, he'd said. A chance to pledge neutrality, maybe cooperation, in exchange for protection. My wolf didn't like it. The last time I walked in here, I murmured, looking up at the heavy oak door scarred by claws. My life exploded. Collins's hand brushed the small of my back, warm even through my cloak. This time you're not alone. That was the problem. I wasn't sure alone wasn't safer. Inside, the tavern was almost exactly as I remembered. Smoke, heat, the low murmur of voices. Different faces at the tables, but the same wary glances as we entered, the same instinctive dip of throats when they scented Collins. My steps faltered as my gaze caught the hearth where I'd first seen him. Mirabelle, he said quietly. I'm fine. I wasn't, but it didn't matter. We were here to show strength, not ghosts. The tavern owner, a wiry man with a scar across his nose, bowed low. Your Majesty, Lady Mirabelle, an honor. They led Collins toward a back room for the talks. I stayed in the main hall by design, a softer presence, less likely to spook rogues who'd spent their lives avoiding kings. Our guard, Jace, took up position near the door, hand on his sword hilt, eyes scanning. It went wrong fast. A tankard crashed in the far corner, ale splashing. A chair scraped back hard. Voices rose too sharp, too staged. Jace's attention flicked that way for a heartbeat. The door behind me slammed open. A cloth clamped over my mouth before I could scream, the sickly sweet scent of something chemical burning my nose. I kicked back, heel connecting with a shin, heard a grunt of pain. Someone cursed. Arms like iron bands locked around my ribs, lifting me off my feet. The last thing I saw before the world blurred was Jace lunging toward me, too far, too slow, and Collins's head snapping up from the doorway of the back room, eyes gone wolf dark. Then everything went black. I woke to cold, rough wood under my cheek, rope biting my wrists, the distant creak of a building settling. My head throbbed in time with my pulse. For a moment, panic flared. Strange ceiling, strange scent, but then my wolf surged up, furious rather than afraid. We were done being prey. You always did sleep like the dead when you were upset, a familiar voice said. Cole. I pushed myself upright, swallowing down dizziness. We were in a hunting lodge, a single large room, stone hearth cold, shuttered windows leaking thin strips of gray light. I was tied to a support beam, hands bound in front rather than behind, generous for a kidnapper, or arrogant. Cole sat on a stool a few feet away, cloak spread neatly, boots unspotted by dirt. He looked the same, polished, curated, every hair in place, as if this were a social call instead of an abduction. Untee me, I said. Hello to you too, he replied lightly. You look well. Royal life suits you. My omega senses, sharpened by weeks at Collins's side, tasted his words. They were smooth on the surface, but underneath lay a knot of resentment and calculation. No regret. No love. You drugged me in a public tavern, I said. You had your men grab me in front of the Alpha King. That's not what someone does when they're trying to rescue a hysterical bride. He smiled thinly. Collateral theatrics. You're hard to get alone these days. I scanned the room. 2 guards by the door, another near the shuttered window. All beta, all watching me with that mix of curiosity and contempt nobles reserved for amusing animals. My wolf picked up their scents, their heartbeats. One nervous, one bored, one strangely blank. Interesting. What's the plan then? I asked. Tie me up until Collins storms the place and slaughters you? That's bold. Collins won't risk a direct assault, Cole said. Not when there are neutral lands at stake. Not when the council already whispers that he's gone soft over a pretty Omega. There it was, the twist of his mouth when he said pretty. He still thought this was about looks. About trophies. You don't understand him at all, I said. I understand men like him perfectly. Cole's eyes hardened. He collects power. You are power wrapped in silk. Useful now, disposable later. Once he's solidified his hold on the council, you'll be an inconvenience. His voice softened, practiced. I won't let him use you that way, Mirabelle. Come back, and we can fix this. Quietly, I'll forgive the theatrics. We'll complete the bond and present a united front. Your father will regain his standing. The gossip will die. Ash bloomed on my tongue. You don't care what happens to me. You care that Collins humiliated you. A flicker of something slipped through his mask, ugly, quick. The king made a mockery of our laws, he snapped. Of contracts signed in good faith, of my name. My father signed that contract, I said. Not me. And you were happy to marry a girl whose nature you helped smother. His gaze cooled. Your nature is a liability, an uncontrollable factor. I did what any responsible mate would do. There it was. The truth. You never saw me as a person, I said slowly, the realization solidifying inside me like stone. Just as leverage. A womb. A seat at the council table. He flinched, just barely. You're being dramatic. No, I murmured. My wolf surged, tasting the room, the emotions swirling under the surface. Cole's fear of Collins, the guard by the door's unease, the one by the window's simmering resentment toward Cole, not me. The way the third's heartbeat spiked whenever Cole snapped. My power, this strange new thing, unfurled fully for the first time. I turned my head toward the resentful guard. Does he pay you well? I asked conversationally. The man stiffened. My lord. Enough, Cole snapped. I ignored him. You think he'll stand in front of you when Collins arrives? Or behind you, using you to block the arrows? The guard's scent soured further, bitter and uncertain. Don't listen to her, Cole said sharply. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Lie. It scraped my tongue, sour and obvious. Yes, do listen, I said softly. Listen to how he talks. How many times has he called you friend? How many times has he sent you into danger while he stayed polished and untouched? The nerves of the third guard flared now too, his fingers twitching near his sword hilt. Enough, Cole repeated, rising. You always did have a sharp tongue. The king will tire of that too. No, I said, meeting his eyes. He won't. Because Collins liked my arguments. He pushed back. Yes, but he listened. He changed course when I was right. He didn't see my defiance as a flaw to correct, but as something that made me useful, infuriating, alive. Cole saw it as a crack to seal. Boots crunched on gravel outside the door. 4 sets, heavy, measured. My heart leapt, the bond inside me suddenly blazing. Collins. He was close enough that my wolf recognized his presence before my mind did. A golden thread pulling taut. Cole didn't notice. He was too busy snarling at his own men. Gag her, he ordered. If she keeps talking, she'll have you turning your swords on me next. The resentful guard hesitated. I struck. Prove him wrong, I said quickly, eyes on the uncertain man. Show him you're not just disposable muscle. When the king comes through that door, whose side will you be, on the one who hides behind you, or the one who walks in front of his own blades? The bond flared, lending my words weight. My scent shifted authority, challenge, the subtle push Omegas weren't supposed to have but royal blood gave them. The guard's wolf shivered. Outside, steel rasped from a scabbard. Cole heard it then. His head snapped toward the door, face going pale. Hold him off, he barked. I need... What? I cut in. Time to hide? I laughed, low and sharp. That's the difference between you and him, Cole. When danger comes, you look for cover. He looks for targets. The door exploded inward. Splinters flew. One guard went down with a shout as it slammed into him. Collins stepped through the wreckage like a storm given human shape, cloak snapping, eyes almost entirely wolf. 4 of his warriors flooded in behind him, blades bared. Get away from her, he growled. Everything happened at once. One of Cole's guards lunged at Collins and was intercepted mid-strike by one of the king's men. The resentful guard mine now. Some wild part of me thought hesitated, then turned his sword not on Collins, but on the third kidnapper, knocking him sideways. Cole grabbed me, jerking me in front of him like a shield, knife flashing cold at my throat. "Take one more step," he panted, and I opened her neck. Collins stopped, chest heaving. Our eyes met over the knife's edge. The bond sang between us, frantic, furious, terrified. "Let her go," he said, voice low and lethal. "You won't make it out of this room if you spill a single drop of her blood." Cole's hand trembled against my skin. "You think she's worth a war, Your Majesty?" "I know she is," Collins said, "because you started one the moment you laid hands on her." His gaze shifted to me, just enough, a question without words. I understood. I let my fear show, let my body tremble, my sense spike, then twisted it, pushing calm and certainty under the surface, not at Collins, but at the wobbly guard still hovering near us. "He'll sacrifice you," I whispered, loud enough for the guard to hear, to buy himself a few more breaths. "Is that the man you're dying for?" Lie from Cole, truth from me. Wolves followed instincts. Mine were no longer caged. The guard's jaw clenched. In one sharp motion, he knocked Cole's arm aside. The knife nicked my skin, shallow, stinging. I dropped, rolling away as I'd seen warriors do a dozen times in the yard. Collins moved. He was on Cole in a heartbeat, disarming him with brutal efficiency, sending the knife skittering across the floor. They crashed into a table, splintering wood, fists and claws and snarled curses. It was ugly and fast and very real, no courtly duel, just two males trying to end each other. I pressed my back against the beam, rope still biting my wrists, heart pounding as warriors clashed around us. One of Collins's men reached me, blade flashing, and sliced my bindings clean. "You all right, my lady?" he asked. "Peachy," I said, shoving numb hands to my chest. "Don't let him kill Cole." He blinked. I want him alive to face what he's done," I said. "Collins will listen if you help pull him off before he goes too far." The warrior nodded once, then dove back into the fray, grabbing his king's shoulder at the last second as Collins drove Cole to the floor, claws at his throat. "Majesty," the warrior grunted. "She's safe. We need him breathing." Collins's eyes, full wolf, flicked to me, to the thin line of blood at my neck, to my hands, free but shaking. Slowly, he pulled his claws back. Cole lay gasping, eyes wild, face a ruin of bruises. "This isn't over," he rasped. "Yes," Collins said, voice ringing with alpha command. "It is." He stood, chest heaving, and crossed the room to me in 3 strides. His hands, those same hands that had just been at another man's throat, gentled as they cupped my face, tilting my head to inspect the cut. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" he asked. "Just my pride," I managed. His thumb brushed the smear of blood, expression darkening. "He laid hands on what's mine," he said softly. More to himself than to me. My heart jumped at the word mine, not because of ownership, but because for the first time, it didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a promise I'd helped make with my choices, my power, my refusal to be anyone's leverage ever again. The clearing felt like the center of the world. Pines ringed the open space, their branches clawing at a sky gone flat and gray. Wolves from both sides crowded the edges, Collins's warriors in dark leathers on one side, Cole's men and a handful of nervous nobles on the other. The air vibrated with growls held behind clenched teeth, with the metallic taste of anticipation. Cole stood near the far edge, face still mottled from the beating he'd taken in the hunting lodge, eyes bright with something ugly. Collins stood opposite him, cloak shed, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, every line of his body coiled and ready. No formal arena, no referee, just dirt, roots, and centuries of instinct. "This was your idea," Cole called across the clearing. "Neutral ground, no council, no witnesses but our packs. Winner takes all." "Winner decides your fate," Collins corrected. "You lost the right to bargains when you laid hands on my queen." The word queen rippled through both groups like a stone in water. I stood off to the side with Collins's warriors, my neck still tender where Cole's knife had kissed skin. The healer had cleaned it. The scar would be faint. The memory wouldn't. "Stay back," Jace murmured. "If this turns, we'll pull you out." I barely heard him. The bond thrummed inside me, keyed up and restless, reacting to Collins's focus, his rising wolf. It tugged me toward him, toward the center of the clearing where the two males began to circle. Afraid to shift? Cole taunted. Or do you want everyone to see how human you are when I put you down? Shift, Colin said mildly. Don't shift. It makes no difference. You're leaving this clearing on your knees either way. They moved. When alphas fought, it wasn't graceful. It was fast, brutal, aimed at ending things quickly. Cole went for speed, darting in with slashes meant to bleed, to humiliate. Collins fought like the storms he smelled of, controlled, heavy, waiting for the moment to break everything open. I felt each impact like a shock through the bond. When Collins took a hit to the ribs, pain flared in my side, phantom but sharp. When he landed a blow to Cole's jaw, satisfaction rolled through me that wasn't entirely my own. Around us, wolves howled encouragement. Some for blood, some for justice. Some because this was what they understood. Dominance decided in dirt. This is wrong, I whispered. Law's law, Jace said. He challenged the king. There has to be an answer. Law. Always law. Written by alphas who'd never been on their knees for anyone's convenience but their own. Another clash. Cole's blade caught Collins's shoulder, drawing real blood this time. My vision tunneled. Enough. Before my fear could turn into thought, my feet were moving. Mirabelle! Someone shouted behind me, but the sound blurred. The clearing narrowed to two men. One I used to fear disappointing, one I feared losing, both so locked on each other they didn't see me until I was there between them. Stop, I snapped. Collins jerked back a fraction, instincts pulling him away from me even mid-strike. Cole didn't. His arm continued its arc, blade flashing far too close. I ducked, the edge whispering past my cheek. A chorus of snarls exploded around us as warriors surged forward, checked only by Collins's barked order. Hold. I straightened slowly, heart hammering, and faced them both. Cole looked outraged. What are you doing? Refusing to stand quietly while you pummel each other over who gets to own me, I said. Murmurs rose from the watching wolves. No one interrupted. You invoked law, I went on, voice carrying farther than I expected. Trial by challenge. Fine. But you all conveniently skipped the part where I get a say. Cole scoffed. This isn't about your say. This is about his overreach, about him stealing what was mine. I was never yours. I cut in. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. Jace had slipped closer, ready to grab me if claws came out, but I held my ground. I turned to the nobles gathered behind Cole. You called this about contracts, about tradition, about betrothals signed in back rooms while the girl thereabout doesn't even know what's being sold. You're wrong. I reached into my cloak and pulled out the folded parchment. Collins had pressed into my hand before we left the original betrothal contract, stolen from my father's study by royal spies with a speed that still scared me. Cole's eyes went wide. How did you— You're not the only one with people who know where you hide your sins, I said. The paper felt heavier than it should, as if all the choices I'd never had were pressed into the fibers. My entire old life, reduced to ink and arrogance. Slowly, deliberately, I tore it down the middle. Gasps ripped through both packs as I let the halves fall to the dirt. There, I said. That's what I think of your contract. Of any law that pretends my future can be traded like a barrel of grain. I turned to Collins. He watched me with a stillness that made my heart stutter. Blood seeped through his shirt at the shoulder. Jaw bruised. Eyes dark and unreadable. This bond, I said, placing a hand over my own chest, where the invisible thread burned bright, is mine as much as his. I choose what it means. I choose who I stand beside. The words tasted like freedom and fear. I took a step toward him. Collins, Alpha King of the Northern Packs, I said, loud enough for every wolf in the clearing to hear. I accept the bond between us, not as your possession, not as your bargaining chip, as your equal. Your queen, if you're still foolish enough to want me after I've caused this much trouble. Something in his face cracked wide open relief, something softer, something that might have been awe. Mirabelle, he said, and my name was a vow. I pivoted back to Cole. You asked if I was worth a war, I said. Here's your answer. I won't be your weapon against him. I won't be your path back to power. You can leave this clearing today with your life and whatever shreds of honor you have left, or you can keep pushing this and lose everything. Cole's lips peeled back from his teeth. You think he'll keep you once he doesn't need you? Watch me, Colin said, stepping up to stand at my shoulder. He didn't touch me, but the solidarity was a wall. Cole's gaze flicked between us, calculating, maddened. You're making a mistake, Mira. You've tied yourself to a monster. When he's done using you, you'll wish you'd come back when you had the chance. Lie. It scraped my tongue, foul and obvious now that my omega senses were fully awake. If I bleed for anyone, I said quietly, it will be for the man who has already bled for me, not the one who only ever cared what my name could buy. Rage flared across his features. So be it, he snarled. If I can't have what's mine, then I'll make sure no one does. He lunged. Collins had been waiting for that. He moved faster than I'd ever seen, shoving me back behind him with one arm as the other met Cole's strike. Steel rang. They crashed together again, this time without the pretense of testing blows. Collins fought with a new ferocity, unleashed by my choice, anchored by it. The packs fell silent, watching their kings decide their fates in muscle and blood. It didn't take long. Cole had skill and desperation. Collins had both of those, plus something Cole had never understood someone to fight for besides his own ego. He used every opening Cole gave him, every tell in his shoulders, every sloppy swing born of pride. Within minutes, Cole was on his knees, one arm twisted behind his back, Collins's claws at the nape of his neck. Do it, someone muttered. End it. Cole spat blood into the dirt. Go on, Majesty, he rasped. Show her what you are. Finish what you started at the lodge. The clearing watched, holding its breath. Collins's claws flexed. The bond inside me shuddered with his fury, with his restraint. He wanted to. I could feel it. Wanted to tear out the threat at the root, to send a message no one would ever misread again. I stepped forward, ignoring the hand that tried to catch my sleeve. Collins, I said softly. He didn't look at me. Couldn't, maybe? Look at me, I insisted. Slowly, as if it cost him, he lifted his gaze. I held it. Don't kill him. A flicker of disbelief crossed his face. After what he's done, I know exactly what he's done, I said. To me, to you, to the packs watching right now. I took another step, until I was close enough to touch him if I wanted. That's why I'm asking. Let him live. Strip his power, his name, his titles, but let the whole realm see him fall and keep crawling. Let them see the difference between the man who hid behind hired knives and the one who could kill and chooses not to. Silence stretched, taut as wire. This is mercy, he said, like he was tasting the word. This is power, I corrected. Anyone can spill blood. Only a king can hold the blade and walk away. The wolves around us listened. So did the bond. Collins's jaw worked. Slowly, his claws retracted, leaving only blunt fingers gripping the back of Cole's neck. By right of challenge, he said, voice carrying across the clearing. I, Collins, Alpha King, declare Cole Halden stripped of title, land, and standing. He is exiled from my territories. Any wolf who shelters him without my consent shares his fate. Gasps. A few protests. No one stepped forward to argue. He leaned closer, murmuring into Cole's ear. Words meant only for him. I couldn't hear them, but whatever he said made Cole flinch harder than any blow had. Then he shoved him forward. Cole sprawled in the dirt, coughing, broken but breathing. Our eyes met, just once. There was no love there, no regret. Only hate and something like bewildered loss, as if he still couldn't understand how he'd lost control of the one piece he'd always assumed was his. I looked away first. Collins turned toward me. For a moment, everything else, the packs, the trees, the blood in the dirt, fell away. It was just us, standing in the clearing where my choice had shifted the axis of our world. He bowed his head, just slightly, not as a king, as a man. My queen, he said quietly, for me alone. Your command, your mercy. My throat tightened. Our decision, I corrected, stepping into his space, letting the watching wolves see us shoulder to shoulder. Our rule. Around us, howls rose hesitant at first, then stronger, a chorus of voices acknowledging, accepting, whether they were ready or not. I tilted my head back, letting the sound wash over me. The girl who'd run into a tavern in a ruined wedding gown trembled somewhere inside me. The woman standing in a forest, clearing beside a blood-spattered king, did not. I had chosen my crown, and he had chosen to bend for me. The rest of the realm would just have to learn how to live with that. The tavern smelled different now, less fear, more possibility. I stood in the doorway where I'd burst through weeks ago in a ruined wedding gown, and took in the changes. Fresh rushes on the floor, new tables, sturdy and clean. Banners hung from the rafters bearing the king's sigil, alongside neutral ground markers, white flags, stitched with the moon goddess's blessing. Guards in Collins's colors flanked the entrance, but their posture was relaxed, welcoming rather than threatening. Strange, isn't it? Collins murmured beside me. Coming back to where it started. Terrifying, I admitted. And right. He'd suggested holding the peace talks here deliberately. The place where an Omega had run from one life and crashed into another. The place where old laws had crumbled and new ones had begun. Symbolism mattered to wolves. We understood rituals written in places, not just words. Inside, representatives from a dozen territories crowded the tables. Minor lords, rogue alphas, even a few merchants whose trade routes had been disrupted by Cole's scheming. They stood when we entered, some bowing deeper than others, all watching with wary respect. Collins didn't sit at the head. He gestured me to the central bench and took the seat beside me, not above. Equal. The talks lasted hours. Border disputes, trade agreements, reparations for the supply raids Cole had orchestrated. I listened more than I spoke, but when I did, wolves leaned in. My Omega senses had become known the girl who could taste lies, who'd turned guards against their master with nothing but words and instinct. It was near the end when Collins stood and the room quieted. One final decree, he said. Effective across all northern territories under my rule. Parchment rustled as scribes prepared to record. No Omega, he continued, voice carrying to every corner, may be forced into a bond, traded in marriage contract, or coerced through suppression of their nature. Any house found guilty of such practice forfeits title and lands. Any alpha who claims an Omega without clear public consent answers to the crown. Silence. Then murmurs, some approving, some shocked. An older lord cleared his throat. Your Majesty, with respect, that undermines centuries of tradition, bloodlines, alliances, will adapt? I cut in, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Or they'll fall. Omegas are not currency. We're people. The realm that forgets that doesn't deserve to stand. Collins's hand found mine under the table, a brief squeeze of solidarity. The law passed. Not unanimously, but enough. Progress. Not perfection. Afterward, as wolves filed out into the night, Collins pulled me aside to the same hearth where we'd first stood across from each other. You ready? He asked quietly. My heart kicked. 4? The rest of it. He meant the marking, the ceremony we'd delayed until I was certain, until the realm had seen us as partners first, mates second. I was certain now. We returned to the fortress under stars that felt like witnesses. In his private chambers, with only the fire and the bond between us, Collins knelt. I've conquered territories, he said, looking up at me. I've broken challengers and bent councils. But I kneel for you, Mirabelle, not because you demand it, but because you're worth every shred of pride I've ever carried. My throat tightened. I sank down to meet him, knees to stone, eye to eye. I ran from a cage, I whispered, and found a king who handed me the keys. I choose you, Collins. Not because I'm trapped, because I'm finally free enough to know the difference. He kissed me then, slow and deep, the bond flaring golden between us. When we broke apart, his eyes had gone wolf dark. The mark, he said roughly. Are you sure? Yes. He bared my throat with gentle fingers, tilting my head just enough. His mouth touched skin, a reverent brush before teeth followed. The bite was sharp, claiming, but I'd asked for it, wanted it. The bond roared, snapping fully into place, no longer a pull but a certainty. Mine, his, ours. When it was done, the mark gleamed at my throat, his sigil written in flesh, visible proof to any wolf who looked that I belonged to the Alpha King. But I wasn't finished. I reached for the knife he kept on the table, the one he'd used 100 times in war councils and strategy sessions. His eyes widened as I pressed the blade to my palm, drawing a thin line of blood. Mirabelle. I pressed my bloodied hand to his chest, over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath my palm. You marked me with teeth, I said. I mark you with choice. With the blood I shed freely, not the kind taken from me. My vow. I will stand beside you, challenge you, fight with you and for you. As your queen, your mate, your equal. His hand covered mine, pressing it tighter against him. Accepted, he said hoarsely. Witnessed. Sealed. The bond between us blazed, complete. 3 nights later, the great hall blazed with candles, hundreds of them, dripping wax onto iron sconces, pooling light across tables laden with food and wine. The entire court had gathered, warriors and nobles and servants alike, to witness the formal presentation of their new queen. I wore midnight blue silk that flowed like water, hair braided back the way Collins liked, the mark at my throat visible and unapologetic. No veil, no timid steps, just me, walking toward the dais where he waited. The room rose as one. Collins extended his hand. I took it, and he drew me up beside him, not behind. When he placed the circlet on my head, delicate silver worked with moonstone, it felt like the weight of every choice that had brought me here. Your queen, he announced. My mate, the woman who teaches me daily that power shared is power doubled. Cheers erupted, genuine and hard-won. I looked out over the hall at faces that had once whispered cruel things, at warriors who'd tested my boundaries and learned to respect them, at the empty seat where Cole would have sat if he'd been anything other than exiled and broken. This was my court now. My people. My life. I'd run into a tavern to escape a future written by other people's hands. I stood in a fortress I'd helped defend, beside a king I'd chosen, wearing a crown I'd earned. I hadn't run away. I'd run toward the only life fierce enough to hold me. Collins leaned close, voice low enough only I could hear. Regrets? I smiled, small and true. Not a single one. His hand tightened on mine as the hall raised their cups in toast, as the candles burned and the bond hummed steady and sure. Somewhere in the distance, the same tavern where it all began stood waiting for the next lost soul who needed to learn that running toward danger was sometimes the bravest thing you could do. I'd found my ending there. Or maybe I'd found my beginning. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And what was your favorite moment? Was it the desperate flight into the tavern, the first time Collins stood between Mirabelle and danger, the kiss that almost happened, or the moment she tore up that contract and chose her own fate? Drop a comment and let me know, because these stories live in the hearts they touch, and I'm grateful you let this one touch yours.